Hello, and welcome to another Wargame War Room with me, Rangaroo, and today we are talking about support units, and I am joined by...
El Baba, play with PLF.
The Chivalrous one, I'm also a PLF.
I'm the Johnny, I also play with PLF.
I'm Random, I play with what the fuck.
And I am Rangaroo, and I'm going to be your host for today. And today we are talking about support units, and the best way we're going to basically split this up is we're going to have the first section of this show dedicated to AA units, from, Silkers, Tors, so on and so forth. And the second part we're going to talk about the artillery units like mortars, MLRS, the big guns, so on and so forth. So yeah, to begin, AA. What do you guys bring up for your AA in your decks?
I mostly bring Ventures and Murder Roland, or no, actually they don't exist anymore. Roland Freeze, either the German or the French ones.
Yeah. Double Rolands are awesome, Roland 3s.
The Rolands are still pretty hard kickers.
Yeah, it's you just have to be on your toes with but they really do pay it off if you pay attention to them.
I think what makes them really good is that they have 10 missiles, where it's a lot of AA units don't really have that many. So you don't have to keep them right next to a supply truck most of the time. You sort of leave them on their own.
They're
That's
only
definitely a plus.
downsides that long reload time.
Yeah, they shoot in the 2 salvo type of
it's
pattern.
every 2 missiles and a 10-second reload. It means if your opponent staggers planes out well enough, he can normally evade your radar AA, only lose 1 plane.
Are you sure it's 10 seconds each time? I
10
got a feeling
seconds
it's
every 2
shorter.
missiles, not every time.
Yeah, I know, but I still have a feeling it's not that long.
It might not be that long because of veterancy.
Yeah, due to veterancy it might, but
Veteran
I know just
doesn't
from
help.
playing Eurocore a lot, like use of just the standard Rolands and Roland 3s, it's 10 seconds as it states. It sometimes feels less if you look away and then come back and it's like, oh, look, it's firing again, but it's 10 seconds.
So, like for Redfall, let's say play Redfall, what would be your ideal AA units to bring up?
If USSR, I would go Strela 10s, Buck M1s, and Tunguska Ms.
I would go with Strela ones, most of Red 4 has them, and if you can, Tors.
Yeah, I'm a fan of double Tors as well. That's a very flexible unit.
What about what makes Estrella so good? Because why do you guys bring it up?
So Strela, it's at the moment the most cost-efficient infrared AA due to having a relatively long range, good accuracy, and packs 5 HE without, and it can fire and forget, so it shoots a second missile before the first one has hit, unlike all the radar AA.
Plus it has 12 missiles on board, so it's not that supply intensive.
And 4 per each reload timer, what means you can normally get shots off it at least 2 planes.
Yeah, and you can have it moving. That's sometimes good if your enemy is attacking your AA with bombers while shooting at you. I don't think you lose much accuracy.
You don't lose any.
No, none.
None? No? That's nice.
It's the same.
But yeah, you're using these cheaper, more stuff AA, because I noticed with Blue 4, they're using the VLRA Mistral, and it really seems like he's IR AA units that the cheap ones are really luxurious to get. What makes them why do you want to get these more cheaper, shorter range ones that are the big, Buks and Osas with super long range and bigger missiles?
2 things. One, fire and forget tag, which means they reload faster than the radar ones. Second, the radar and guided tag that the radars have. So radar can be shot down by seed, can only be guided, so once you lose line of sight or you get stunned or something, it's out, or they just run away fast enough, you can't track them. Fire and forget always follows and shoots faster.
So it's just safer to get fire and forget, or easier.
It's faster firing and safer due to no reliable on seed.
And speaking of seed, do you guys find seed much of a trouble when having AA? Like, is it a pain in the ass?
I don't see many people run seed at all, at least in competitive format, because it's a plain slot that's not really doing anything to help you push.
Yeah, same here.
It's a very huge investment, and it's like very rarely pays itself off.
So you don't really have to worry about it all with radar AA.
I mean, if
You
you're
have
going
to
up,
keep it in mind, but it's not always that threatening.
Yeah, it's more of, if you're going up against Commonwealth or Canada, keep in mind that they might, try to rape you with seed with the voodoos, but besides that, I really don't see it.
Yeah, so what make these seed planes, is a bit off topic, why aren't people really bringing them, just quickly?
Because for what they actually do, they don't help you advance ground. They're helping you eliminate AA, what can at times help you advance ground, but if the enemy has a lot of IRAA, your bombers just will get shot down. So you're spending 160 points to eliminate some AA, but not all.
When you could just
Plus-
use like a bomber.
Plus, it's the plane shot is very expensive. If you already have your, let's say you have an A plane, you have an ATGM plane, you have your basic bomber, and maybe even an interceptor. That fifth plane slot costs so much. You have to sacrifice so much from your other choices in the deck that it's very rarely pays it off.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So really just seed, you could just get something else to do its job better. Because it's just taking up that one slot, which you need it for all the other stuff.
Yes,
Mainly just, it's limiting.
especially in 1v1 and 2v2. I think in 3v4 and 3v3 and 4v4, if one player or maybe even two get a card of seed, it can be nice, but I rarely play such big games.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're playing Commonwealth or Eurocore, you're just better off saving the points and getting some Caesars or AS90s. They'll probably kill that the one radar AA piece and do so much more with the same investment.
So, speaking of just the general balance of AA units, do you think it's balanced how AA units are at the moment?
Well, there are some units that have been, or they seem like they've been almost completely forgotten, like compare the OSA AKM with the Tor, for example. There's a 5-point difference, and if you look at the performance, the Tor is so much superior. There's no reason ever to pick the OSA AKM.
Yeah, because it seems like with AA units, there's a lot of redundant units that are kind of just useless. Like, there's a lot of AA units that you're never gonna buy because there's something better. Like,
Yeah, that's
for
right.
example, like, especially the OSHA. The OSHA in AOB, the OSHA is a very popular AA unit to get, as it shot really fast and had a pretty decent range. But now you never see OSHAs anymore. They kind of just rent to the rayside.
Yeah,
think
I
if
mean,
they went back to Fire and Forget, maybe they would be worth the price, because a Fire and Forget radar system that's 150 road speed is quite handy. But at guided for 75 points, it doesn't make any sense at all.
yeah. I mean,
Well-
I sort of feel like it got almost double nerfed because it's amphibious as well, and I don't know if they include that into the price. So if it's amphibious, it's like 5 or something points more. But
The amphibic part is not really a big problem. 70 or 75 doesn't make a big difference in my opinion. But it was double nerfed by A, increasing the price by 50%, and B, making it guided, which every radar A unit is, and I think the guided is not the biggest problem. It's that they first increase the price and then put on guided without rethinking the price again for many of the AA units. So now we have infrared units that are very cheap and very efficient, and guided radar units that are similar efficient but cost 50% more.
I'd have to agree with you in the IR thing, because IR AA, because that's fire and forget, it's cheap and it's not seedable. It's really luxurious to get. Where radar, it can do a big boom, cause quite a bit of damage, and has longer range, but it's more vulnerable.
Yeah. It is.
This also shows in spec very, very, very good.
And also I find so go ahead.
If we take, for example, French spec, we get for the same price a Web VDAA or a AMX-13 Well Noir. They both have a similar range on helicopters and similar damage output, but one is radar guided, the other is not, which gives this difference in airplane range.
Yeah, that's the difference between radar and IR. IR is better against helicopters.
And in the end, they cost the same, while the Web is pretty much superior in everything but plane range. Which I think makes no sense.
Yeah. I find that funny though, because how they intended it for you to use AAs, use your IR to sort of stick a bit closer to your front line, it's to shoot down those pesky helicopters, and then you have your radar and your backline shooting down the planes, but it just seems like it's just better to get IR, AA, just overall.
Oh, in my opinion, if your entire air defense is only IR-AA, you're going to get rolled by planes because of the range. I mean, you still need radar AA no matter what, and especially long-range radar AA.
I don't really tend to think that way, due to the fact that even if you have a long-range missile, let's say it's a bomber, it's going to come towards you, it's going to bomb you, and it's going to be right over your air defense, it's going to be really close to your units, where range doesn't really matter. And
the thing is, though, it's still dropped bombs, what you don't want to happen. Same thing with ATGM planes. If it gets its missiles off, then it's done its goal. It doesn't matter if the plane then dies or not.
But most of the times you can't stop it from dropping its bombs or doing its ATGMs. Most of the time it always survives, and then once it's shot off, then it usually dies when retreating backwards.
With long-range radar AA, like a Buk M1, you can stop it because of the very high suppression damage. 360 will pretty much stun any incoming plane if it hits. Well, you know, it's only a possibility. It's not a guarantee it's going to stun, but you have like 2 Buks up, and that's 2 chances to stun any plane before it comes in, and it's completely outranging any bomber or ATGM.
But yeah, they can just ban planes, even though the Buk does a really nice big HE damage, and the Pong guy too. If they just spam a bunch of bombers like Skyhawks, for example, random, yeah, and they just completely mess up still. You may shoot down 1 or 2 of them, but they're still going to get out and drop and do damage.
The nice thing with the radar AA is that you don't really have to have it with your front lines, or actually your radar.
You cut out.
You would see some. Yeah, I'm getting used to this push to talk thing. You can have them behind your lines, so at relatively safe positions, and still kill the planes, whereas if you don't have your Avenger with the troops that are getting bombed, like you have them a little bit behind, it's quite likely that certain planes get out, especially the ones with good evac pattern. So the Kahu, that's the worst one, I think. You will never shoot it down with infrared AA if you don't have your AA way before the unit it targets. And even stuff like the F-16, if you have your infrared not with the stuff it targets, or maybe even a little bit before, you will never shoot it down, and it will come, it can do one run after the other, and you will lose many points. So for that, I think you need something like the Murder Roll 3.
So you're saying that you, no matter what, the radar is always a chance to shoot down the plane before it drops its bombs?
No, not really before it drops its bombs, but certain infrared AA in certain situations has very small chances to shoot down the planes. It's very rare that, especially in the games I play, which have maybe little less units per the same amount of the front line. It's very rare that the plane gets shot down before it can accomplish its mission, unless it loses recon. But often the planes also get out, and that's very bad.
Because from just my general thinking of it is just, if you just have a crap ton of missiles following a plane, even if they're really crap, it's gonna die. Because there's more chances.
The thing is, though, it's still getting the missiles or its bombs off, and it's done its goal. So if the plane dies, like the Kahu dies, but it killed your T-80UM or your BU, the thing's paid for itself almost 2 times over. So if you kill the plane, okay, that's fine. But I mean, because of its high turn radius, slow speed, you're probably not going to do it. And even like a MiG-27 that comes in and it kills something, congrats, you killed it, but it still killed something that was worth way more to you than that plane is to your enemy.
Fair enough.
Like Random said that the infrared AA doesn't have the stretch to always get the stuff. You have to, like he said, you'd have to have it like really close to your first tanks or something to be able to get shots off.
Yeah, it's a very good like filler type AA. Very, very good for that.
Yeah, but sometimes
probably
you just need the
kills, but against specific targets, you need something with longer range that can reach out and touch them before they can do any damage.
Okay, fair enough. So it's always good to have the big bloody radar in the back, like the Buks and all of that, is what you're saying. Because you can reach out and touch them.
You know, not saying bring 2 cards, you probably only need 2 out at a time. But your IRA is a lot of your filler type stuff. Your radar will probably get the first shot, like a Buk. Probably stun a plane, it probably won't kill it. Your IRA will kill it once it flies over, but it still stunned it and didn't allow it to drop or use ATGMs, whatever it's carrying.
Okay. But speaking of AA, you guys may disagree with me in this, and if you do, please do so. But I think the best AA unit to bring out are manpads. Due to the fact that you can hide, I know it's technically infantry, but you can hide them in towns, so you can get them really close to the front lines, you can put them bloody everywhere, and they're kind of cheap. So what I find with a lot of my matches is that I just get, like, right off the back, 6 guys with Javelin AA missiles and just put them all over the town. If they're cheap, you don't... Go ahead.
Yeah, but that sort of implies that you won't go any further than that town. You can't really attack with manpads. You have 2 Avengers, you can move them along with your tanks, but you can't walk your manpads fast enough.
Yeah, even if you're playing Commonwealth and you have the slow 40-kilometer-hour tanks that they have, manpads won't cut it because they're going to be lagging behind so badly. And every single one of your tanks is going to go right past your air defense network and get picked off by ATGMs.
Well, manpads have 2 very important disadvantages when attacking. A, as mentioned, they are very slow, so movement is almost impossible, and B, they are very, very weak. 2-man mostly, only the Mistrals I think, and the RBS troops from Sweden are 5-man, so 1 shot and they're dead, if they are found outside the city. So in the end, it's not really worth it to risk them on an attacking move. If you want to attack, you need something that actually moves fast and can take a hit, like AA vehicles.
Yeah, the manpads, they can be very good in certain situations, but I mean, first of all, you probably should look to have a 5HE so it can kill a plane in 2 shots. Because the 4HE and 3HE, even worse, manpads, they just are inefficient at killing stuff. And then there's a problem because you have to sacrifice an infantry slot, and in Conquest you need your infantry slots. So if you put in like a Mistral, that takes away like 12 Panzergrenadiere or 12 Sapper, something like that. Something else you have to keep in mind, the SAS, they're also quite nice as manpads, and you already have them, so it's not really worth a slot. The exception to this would probably be in a mechanized deck. There you can get like the Mistral for 35 points in the very slow APC, and they are quite nice, I think.
Okay.
Manpads, if you're going to attack with manpads, they're quite good if you can, like, if it's a stalemate fight and you're able to get them out into, like, the middle of the field, you can normally shoot down some helicopters, planes that are coming up, but if you're using them during the immediate attack, they're going to be way too slow.
But in defense, they're pretty good, and you can sort of scatter them around everywhere as well. Like
defense, it's very good. But the thing is, like in conquest, you want to, unless you've completely made it to the enemy home sector, you want to keep pushing. So very good in a defensive position, or if you need to go move somewhere else to help someone else, they're great. But on the attack, they kind of you start seeing the weaknesses that they have.
Yeah, I mean, here the SAS are pretty much the only manpads which can move at a reasonable speed. All of the others are 15 kilometers per hour, I think all of them are.
Mistrals
well, maybe
20, still slow.
Some have 20?
Mistrals, they are
Mistral
20,
have
but are
15.
still too slow.
No, Mistral have 15. I'm looking at it right now.
What? After 15?
Mistrals are 15.
Yeah.
Mistrals are 15.
Yeah, and then on the compared to that, the SAS they have 30, so they can keep up sometimes. But the 15 kilometers per hour, if you can afford to get them, because as I said, infantry slots are very valuable. So if you have a mechanized tech and you can afford to get a specialized manpad team, you can only move them up after the attack.
There should be honorable mention FJB 40. Technically like they are technically like the SAS, but they have a crap manpad, so just an honorable mention.
Yeah, you actually used to be able to get away with them because with the infantry multipliers at Elite, they actually had 5 HE. And because of the speed, they could make up for the kind of bad range.
And you can get them in
But yeah,
hunts.
now they have 3 HE, so suck.
Yeah, it's like, no, where'd my FJB go?
So if you need fast, and maneuverable AA, what AA would you bring up for an attack? What would be your attacking AA units you'd bring up behind your tanks and whatnot?
NATO or Pact?
Let's do NATO first.
For NATO, you could always go for the Rolands. The AMX 30 models or the Marder models are similar speed as the tanks. And if you want it even faster, there is a wheeled Roland from Germany. And if you are going with slower stuff, with slower attacks, yeah, still go for the Rolands. They're pretty much the most maneuverable AA out there, and still have quite good defense, quite good armor.
I wouldn't really take the ones with wheels from West Germany, because the Roland 2s, I think they're pretty bad, aren't they?
Roland 2 is quite bad due to the rather low range, but they are about the fastest AA that NATO has. That is the only advantage.
I usually use the Avengers because they never have to reload. All their 8 missiles are already ready. They can shoot them within seconds, and they have 70% accuracy, and they have very fast speed, 90 kilometers per hour, and they can they can shoot on the move with 100% of their accuracy, so also 70%. And if I attack, I have my Roland 3 a little bit behind my tanks, because I only get 4 of them. So if I start losing them left and right, I'm gonna run into problems.
Yeah, if you're playing Iroquois as well, I find Crotal to be quite handy.
Yeah, I like the
Because of
Crotal
the
a lot.
extra range, and I mean, the accuracy's bad, but since it's shooting off all 4 missiles almost instantaneously, you only need 2 to hit, so at 50% accuracy, it's kind of a guaranteed kill on a plane, if you can keep the logistics nearby.
Yeah, definitely need supply trucks with those guys, because with low accuracy and long range, you're gonna waste your missiles against transport helicopters, or like if a plane just flies a little bit in their range, maybe they shoot only 2 missiles, and they're gonna run through their missiles in a second.
Yeah,
So
the main issue with them is, you know, they normally will shoot off all 4 missiles at one target. And it might be already be dead and the 4th missile goes off, so you always have to have logistics with them. But if you can keep them resupplied, they're actually surprisingly good.
Really neat units well is the Tansan Japanese. very good on opening, like let's say, for instance, Bloody Ridge. Yeah, town that always gets fought over. I mean, that thing has a good Elo AA. It's wheeled 8 missiles, so it can sit there and shoot over the town if the enemy is crazy enough to try to pull out the packed Elo board insertion.
Also, there's the VBO Mistral, which is just fantastic, 95 speed and good optics. Very good frontline unit.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Ward offs helicopters, planes, and gives you eyesight.
And it's cheap.
Yeah, I mean, 55 points for it is really, really quite good price.
Yes, and it's in the recon tab. So, and you have to play Eurocore or France to get it anyway. So in this decks, the recon slots aren't as valuable as in the mixed decks. So you can get them. I mean, it's almost 100 kilometers per hour, and it can shoot. It has 2 missiles on the ready, so it potentially can kill a plane. Unlike the missile truck, which has to reload for quite some time after each shot, and it also provides good recon. It's a very nice unit.
Yeah. I mean, if you just compare the price of that thing to like an normal Avenger or the Japanese equivalent, then that's, I mean, you get so much for so little points.
Yeah.
And for Redfall, how would you like, what AA units would you bring up for Redfall for an assault?
Strela 10.
Definitely.
There should be no question beside how many.
Yeah.
So you bring up Estrella 10s, and then Buks in the back line.
Tors in the back line.
Oh,
but-
Tors, yeah, Tors.
Yeah,
Yeah, Buks
are
would
really
do the
good.
same.
Yeah, I
for me,
don't really use
only
Buks.
because of the range.
Yeah, Tor's an interesting beast. It's really sort of a game changer, as it's so well-rounded, and it's pretty expensive. Has like really great range and helicopters and planes with good accuracy.
Yeah, it's like I said before, it's very flexible. It can do many things reliably. Don't know if you're facing helos or a lot of planes, it can deal with both very effectively.
So speaking of helicopters, really been talking about shooting down planes, but for helicopters, what's your strategy for trying to take out a helicopter, like a pesky Hind or a Tigra Hap, something like that?
For me, Tongue.
Tunguska?
I think it's probably the best anti-helicopter AA maybe in game. Because of the guns, you can help conserve missile against small troop transports.
Then it has a really long range missiles. You can keep it quite close to your front lines. It has a little bit of armor.
I mean, you still have to be careful of it because, everyone knows it's 90 points. It's normally a #1 artillery target, so normally it's good to just give them shift orders to have them move around. But if you can keep them alive, they're quite good.
And for go ahead.
Yeah, and a little trick with like if you have Avengers or Strela 10s or stuff like that that have the same accuracy on the move as they do standing still. If you're being heavily artilleried on your AA positions or try to get cheap bombed, then you can just put them on shift move a pattern. So whenever they fire, when there are no more targets, they'll move to another position, and if he tries to counter battery you there, he'll automatically miss.
Yeah, I would actually just say you should do that in general. It makes your opponent, if they watch it go into a bush, they know where all your forces are, and they're going to start shelling no matter what. If it's constantly moving in the back line, they're not going to really know where your forces are concentrated.
So like Tunguska and like the more smaller, faster IR is really good against helicopters.
Yeah, same with,
you can kind of sneak them
again,
around.
HQ7, the Crotal, but, always make sure you have logistics for it constantly.
Do you find helicopters much of a threat with AA?
In the games I play, they're not really that much problem. The expensive ones aren't anyway. The smaller ones are annoying to some AA because they kind of waste their ammo. Especially if there's open with many transport helos. Let's say some of them have 6 health, so that's gonna, depending on the AA, 2 to 4 missiles if it wastes one in the end and doesn't really hit well, 4 even. but the big ones, I don't know. I usually if I have a murder roll on 3 or something like that, it's more than enough to deal with them. They're not really an issue in 1v1 and 2v2.
Yeah, I mean, even in bigger team games, I would have to agree with Random. For the most part, if you have good AA, maybe the expensive helicopters will pick off 1 or 2 units, but for the most part, they will never really get their points back for that. Because you can just keep warding them off.
You just use them as sort of deterrent. It's like, hey,
I mean, if there's something like an actual anti-helicopter AA piece you have out on the field, they're not going to be able to outrange it, so it's simply a suicide mission if they try to bring it near your lines.
So helicopters a bit more for defensive, yeah.
Yeah, they can be very good if you can exploit enemy AA correctly, but for the most part, I think it's quite a lockdown on them.
And most AA we've really been talking about are missiles. What do you guys really think about cannon AA, like Silkers and Gepard Roland, Gepard, so on and so forth?
I think in beta they weren't bad because of the 2-time damage multiplier on the guns. Now I just think they're really bad, especially with the seed buff. I mean, if your main AA line's composed of Gepards, you know, one cheap little seed plane comes by or an expensive one and it just mops it up.
Why would I pay 40 points for radar AAPs like the PVADs when I can pay 5 points more and get infrared AAPs that actually kills stuff instead of just shaving 1 or 2 hit points off?
Yeah, exactly.
The problem
it doesn't make any sense.
Problem is their inefficiency against planes. I mean, the upside is you will never run out of ammo. Besides the pivots and the Vulcan, that one will run out of ammo quite often, but the other ones, they will never run out of ammo, so that's definitely a nice thing, especially for conquest. But problem is they're quite inefficient against planes, and even an Avenger, sometimes if a plane flies over them, it might get 3 or even 4 shots off, and it will kill it.
I think...
Yeah. Avenger is pretty much a guaranteed kill on any plane that flies over, just because of the fast aim time.
Well, the biggest problem for radar or non-radar spec is that the infrared AA is so efficient. Because they have a similar range, they have similar target areas, and they have a similar job of getting rid of helos, mostly.
So can Spags is sort of just redundant to IR missile AA?
It's not redundant, but it's kind of like a bad stepbrother that nobody likes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's the same price pretty much as most IRAA, and it's only doing about half the damage normally on a pass a plane goes over, and it's also weak to seed. So there's just too many negatives, and there's really like no positive side to it, besides it maybe being 5 points cheaper.
One last thing, it can kill infantry sometimes, which it's nice in 1v1 conquest, but it's not enough for me to take them.
Yeah, agreed.
So what would make them better?
Not really good enough.
What
could make them better is give them more range, give them faster rate of attack, or give them more accuracy. Just give them something that neither radar AA, radar missiles nor infrared missiles have.
I think
or just give them the 2x damage multiplier they had in beta. I mean, they were good in beta because of that, and then they removed it, and now they're, well, what they are now.
So each shot was doing 2 HE basically, the 2x damage multiplier.
What actually made them effective, because even ones with slower rate of fire had a chance of killing a plane, or at least stunning it.
Yeah, I think...
One last thing about them. There's some units which are good. Especially for example, if you look at the Chinese, for 20 points they get AAA without radar. It has 2,800 meters against helicopter helos, and it has I mean, it can shoot on infantry, as I said before. It has decent speed, 55 kilometers an hour, no problems with autonomy, and especially it has armor, so that makes it again good against infantry. And it can kill helos quite nicely. 20.
Yeah, and I was about to say that the PG-95 can the missile and the guns at the same time, which make it pretty nice. I think they're gonna implement the same thing on the prototype German Gepard as well, and the Polish Bernet with the Strela 3s. So those might be interesting choices, but other than that, they're not really worth the slot at the moment.
I think for Cannon AA, they really should be more about stunning the enemy planes, kind of stopping them. Like not exactly killers, but they stun them, so your like radar, AA, all of that can shoot them down.
I feel like that was kind of their goal, but
Yeah.
since a lot of them have slow rate of fire, it just doesn't work out that way.
Because
You know, maybe
Yeah.
the PGZ-95 because the rate of fire is insane, but something like a Gepard that doesn't even get 200 rounds per minute, it's just in weak suppression damage. It's like, well, we're not really going to get anywhere.
Thing is, the Gepard is not actually shooting that slow as it might seem.
Is it shooting faster then or slower than it seems?
They're shooting much faster than it seems.
Well,
The
that's because
Gepard
they-
shoots at the same rate of damage rolls as the Tunguska or the Beryusha from the Soviets. So in the end, there's a very big area of 40 to 45 attacks per minute specs, where many of them fall in. So the difference in rate of fire is mostly not existent at any point. It's
Yeah,
just purely cosmetic.
The rate of fire that shows how long it will take for them to burn through their ammo. It has no impact on how often they have a chance to do their display damage. That's kind of bad, actually, I think. One last thing on the topic of stunning and AAA. There's one quite interesting unit with North Korea, and some other nations have it as well, I think. The ZSU 57-2. It's kind of not really an anti-air unit, but it has very nice armor. It can shoot at everything. It can shoot at plane helos with both very small range, and it can shoot at ground targets with 1.5 kilometers, and can kill pretty much everything. If you have 4 of them in a forest and the enemy tries to bomb something behind the forest, you will get stunned and have to evac.
I think the Germans have a similar one as well, the Flak Panzer, but it doesn't really seem
Panzer
as
41, that thing is pretty much crap.
good. Yeah.
Poland has it as well.
And also you have some other like vehicle units that act as AA. Like the Americans, they have their what's it called? The M163 CS, which is ridiculously slow, ridiculously rubbish range against planes and helicopters. But it does have that.
And it will run through their ammo in 1 minute, and that's very bad. That makes it completely useless. Even if it were good in its other jobs, if it runs out of ammo after 1 minute shooting at infantry, then it has been useless because you already have to spend again money to resupply it, and it's just a huge pain.
So overall, let's just kind of want to bring us AA part to the end. AA, is it good? Like not good as in, is it sort of balanced, and is it kind of alright for the game? In just a general aspect.
Well,
AA.
there are a few that overshadow the rest by quite far, so a little rework on the section would be nice to bring up the redundant units like the OSA AKM, for instance, which doesn't really have a spot in the game.
Yeah, I agree. The balancing of EA versus other parts of the game, I think it's nice, but there are just very few units which actually are competitive. So which are actually going to be used, because the gap between them and the worst units is just too big.
And in my opinion, if a whole unit class like Specs is much put in the worst corner for everything, it's not really good.
So really just VA is a lot of redundancy and a lot of units that are rubbish that need to be brought up. But for the good units that you do use, you don't find them like overpowered and game breaking?
Mostly not. So
No, not really.
the AA units mostly can't do anything about the main push. They can only go against air, which is a big part of the game and can be game changing, but what you're gonna do with 10 Rolands if the enemy only has a tank?
The tank will eat them all up. And just for tactics, it's good to have a bit of both, bit of IR, a bit of radar.
Long range radar, not the
What long
short
range
range.
radar? Long range radar, filler IR in the front, and that's like the most effective raid to do your AA net per se.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, good. And so with the AA part done, we're going to go over to artillery from MLRS, mortars, all the big runs and whatnot. So for artillery, what artillery units you guys bring up in your decks, in your competitive decks?
Precision howitzers are just so much fun.
And what would be the precision howitzers?
Caesars, AS90s, to an extent, Mistas, not fully, but it's kind of the only thing USSR has that's comparable.
Yeah, Caesar and the AS90, you see them in every game now. They're so popular. What makes them good? What makes them good?
Pretty much, I mean, the AS90, if you are good with your micro and can shift click, then the thing's pretty much almost impossible to counter battery. Because by the time the first shell lands, it's already moved to position. And for the most part, same thing with the Caesar, although it shoots 3 more rounds because of the high speed, it can normally get away even if cluster munitions are coming in on it.
Yeah, but it's wheeled, so it's a bit faster.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's why you can get away from the clusters. It's like, oh, look, cluster's coming. Okay, bye. I'm just going to reverse out of here.
Yeah, and I mean, if you have a map that has a big road network, you can just shift, fast move. It'll scoot off even faster. Yeah, I personally like the short burst artillery units. I haven't grown accustomed to the long continuous salvo like the MSTAS and the AUF ones, but maybe that's just my lacking. I like the fast fire and scoot out of there type of.
Well, in my opinion, the big guns are not always the most best thing that you should use. I myself use mortars, 120mm of that. Eva red 4 or blue 4. So
the only issues with mortars currently is I think the logistics cost that it takes to resupply them is just like insane. It's the same pretty much ammo capacity as a 155 for so much less damage, and the critical mass you need to start taking out AA pieces is like 4 or 5 of them.
If I count all the amounts of rounds resupplied in all my games, I don't even come to 100.
Mortars,
because the mortars that I use always have a very big amount of rounds in them. So very often they die before they even get fired dry.
For me, since I use mortars for saturation and advancement and taking out light targets, I normally find for most of my mortar carriers, even if they carry 140 rounds, I will normally end up having to resupply. Because I use them, like, if I'm advancing into a town, I'll keep the town under smoke for 10 minutes at a time. And then the logistics cost of, like, 55 logistics per round is just kind of insane.
Well, in your case, you're going most likely with 81mm round.
No, 120, because you need the extra HE if units are in buildings.
Then, well, I use 120mm and I almost never have to resupply, and also use them quite heavily on about everything I see.
I don't really use artillery in my 1v1.
Cut out there.
Yeah. Alright, let's try this again. I don't use it in 1v1 because it's not in my deck. I mostly use planes for the jobs that I would do with artillery otherwise. In 2v2 I think one card of artillery is quite nice, and I think there's pretty much 2 options for it. One of them is the M108. It's almost like a mortar. It has 5 HE, but really a lot of more than 100 shells per unit, so it won't run out. That's very nice. And it's just to, let's say you're fighting between two forests or something, you just can let them keep shooting at the enemy forests, and it will cause losses and bad morale and stuff like that. It's very good for that. Or another unit that's also good for that is the American M109. It has 5 RPM but 7 HE, but it only carries carries only 28 shells, so you will maybe have to refill it. But it's also it's not for sniping one target, but to keep continuous pressure and pressure on a city or a forest you are assaulting or you're going to assault, and it will cause losses over time if your enemy doesn't move out, and often he can't move out, because if he does, then you'll just take it.
So with like the medium howitzers like the M109 and like the 50 to 70 point runs, they're better for just saturation instead of pinpoint accuracy, because I find them to be really inaccurate. But is that sort of like a good thing because they can just saturate a large area?
I mean, I'm not sure actually. I don't really use them because I always play 2v2 rank with Hunter, and it's in his deck, so it's kind of his problem. But I don't think I'd want them much more accurate. Maybe a little bit, but I mean, you aren't going to kill an anti-air unit. You can just forget it. I mean, it's 9,000 meter. No, 900.
9,100 meter dispersion.
The dispersion in the armory doesn't really say how big it really is in the game, because it's always changed due to some scale. If it would be a 9,000 meter dispersion, unless you shoot on max range, you would hit your own.
Yeah, but I mean, you can kind of compare it to other units with this stat, even though it doesn't really mean anything.
Definitely. And I have calculated a bit around, and if you take the medium howitzers 155mm or 152mm from the Red 4, you have between 10 and 25% chance to do suppression damage to an enemy within the central part of the circle.
Yeah, I think that's the main reason you really bring the lower end howitzers, is because you want them for suppression damage. Well, I mean,
I don't really use them for that. I mean, Hunter doesn't really use them for that. They're nice if they suppress the units and if you're just attacking, but also if they're just, it's a forest which your enemy has tanks in and infantry. He has to refill them, he has to buy more, he has to spend more points to resupply them. I mean, the suppression, it's nice, but, and it will kill infantry units and stuff. I think the killing is more important than the suppression, even though the suppression is definitely a very nice thing.
Well, I mean more for 3v3, 4v4. Like, say, floods, for instance, the forests that are in the middle, the M109 perfectly covers those forests, that you can just consistently pretty much annoy your enemy and make him move his units out, or just sit there and keep taking damage over and over and over again.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, the important part is when you're under artillery fire and the fire is just going on and on, you can't resupply your units, you have to move back and out. Due to the mechanic that under suppression you can't refill. And you have like 20-30 seconds that you don't have to not take suppression before you can refill your units again.
And hence it being just a constant nuisance. Because constantly hearing alarms go off and not being able to repair units is annoying.
Yeah, and if you take the medium howitzers, you can get quite many of them, like 3, 4 or 5, to shell a single area instead of just 2 or 3 like the Caesars. And then you can just saturate an area instead of pinpoint attacking the single unit.
Yeah, but I think that's also a thing that has come with maps, that on some certain sectors you only have the one little forest that the enemy forces can be in. So it's almost like a 100% bet that you're gonna hit something at some point if you just keep shooting there. For instance, like in escalation, you couldn't really do blind arty. You had to have recon to get anything done.
Well, in European escalation, that was different arty mechanics.
Yeah, that's true, but
But even in ALB, some of the maps there was possibility for blind artillery and hitting. Some others, yeah, you could shoot for the whole game, could shoot 2 fobs empty and not hit anything. And I think the map design should go back towards more smaller hiding places, where it isn't even worth it to artillery without ultra high precision artillery.
So you're sort of saying the map's the sort of reason why artillery is being used right now? Because
Partly, yes.
yeah.
The maps promote the stalemate promotes artillery.
Yeah, without small hiding spots, like some more farmland, hedges, and swamps, it's kind of clear where the enemy vehicle is if it's in cover. And if it's not, then simple suicide recce infantry or helicopter will find it if it's out in the open.
As a lot of like the maps, you only have forests to hide behind, as you don't have like a lot of farmlands and headlines anymore to hide behind. So you have like this run forest where you know the enemy's in, so you just shell it constantly with medium howitzers and heavy howitzers.
Or then you take like 2 Smirches or 2 Mars and fire it in that wood, and you know you're gonna kill something or make him completely back off from the forest.
And speaking of Smirches and Mars, do you guys like using cluster artillery at all? Or how do you use your clusters? Like, what would you target with your cluster artillery?
Well, Merch is a very good counter battery unit, and like we said, that the forest areas on certain maps are so small and so predictable hiding places that it's almost like a safe bet to buy them and try to kill stuff with them. The Atacams needs more thought on where you shoot it, but it'll get the job done most of the times. Well,
and a unit like Mars with a low AP can be very nice for stunning some units before an attack.
So really, the cluster's good for just getting up. You know the enemy's all hidden in run forest. You just boom, there goes a lot of their light vehicles.
Yeah, and I mean enough concentrate or shots will kill heavy tanks, and it might make them, you know, try to leave the forest, and then they walk right into your tanks, so pick them off.
And what about for cluster artillery? I mean counter artillery. Are they good for countering enemy artillery if you fire at them?
As Alboba said earlier, Smirch is the perfect counter-artillery. It's a very big area, and whatever is in it is most likely hit and killed. If you have 2 Smirches.
And with most artillery having like no armor, you sometimes don't even need to fire all 12. You can just do like 6 and normally guarantee kill a lot of enemy artillery.
I think that's also another cool thing with Smirks and whatnot. If you fire it correctly and stop its barrage halfway through, you can just fire 6 at one area and 6 at another, or 2 and 2, and sort of spread out the artillery. Because with clusters, a lot of the shots hit the same area twice, which you don't really need to do.
yeah, and the Atacam salvo is basically a must to split as well, because otherwise it'll just put the 2 high AP munitions on the same area, which makes it waste 50% of its loadout.
Yep.
Would you find cluster artillery a little bit too powerful, or do you think it's nice and balanced?
It would be a bit better, like we said 1,000 times, if the maps were a bit more, I don't want to say better designed, but not promoting the use of artillery in the sense that it is now.
So basically spreading out your units?
More cover get your units to, because like we said before, it's very predictable where enemy is going to have his units, and if you don't know, just run up a empty APC, see where the shot came from and fire there.
Yeah, definitely that.
So really it's just the maps are really playing a big difference or big factor why artillery is being used for that is now just suppressing a giant forest because that's the only place they can hide. Where in ALB and E, there's like multiple forests and headlines you could hide your units in. So it's all having all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, plus, like when we talked in the maps episode, that the bridges make advancing, and the rivers and bridges make advancing in certain areas pretty hard. So it's gonna sort of concentrate on the bridge areas even more on the maps that are split. So. Yeah.
So it's like the bridges, it's really predictable where they're going to come from. So you just sell it beforehand.
Yeah, or like if you have you have one forest patch on the other side of the bridge, you know the guy has to sit in that forest and defend. So you just Buratino, Atacams, whatever, and you know,
mess them up. But also, speaking of artillery, there's also another feature they can do, and that is smoke. How often do you guys use smoke in your artillery units? Or do you use, how do you use your smoke?
If I use smoke, I'll probably use it for mortars instead of like actual howitzers.
Same, because with howitzers, it's a lot more expensive. With mortars, you can kind of cover a bigger area if you single smoke them.
Yeah, and I mean mortars, it's gonna do it quicker because it's a higher rate of fire and for a little bit less logistics.
Yeah, or you can use the Chinese smoke machine. The
Chinese Napalm Arty.
It'll create a PHL 63. You can create a smoke wall with that as well, except the smoke wall is burning at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, I prefer the improved Russian model TOS-1 Buratino.
Yeah.
Then inside the smoke, there's not much left alive before it burns.
So really, I want to talk about Napalm Arty because the Napalm artillery, like the Buratino and the Chinese runs, they're really bloody powerful. It's like a napalm plane, but without having to actually have a plane. You just fire it from safe distance and do the same amount of damage.
Yeah, I mean, you can basically say that enemy forces cannot be in this area, period, and that's a huge thing.
It's kind of like a giant eraser. Just comes down from the sky and just erases all the units inside of it.
Yeah, and on, like, for instance, Bloody Ridge, if you have, let's say you have a Red Dragons player and a Soviet or a mixed deck player, and if they split their PHLs and Buratinos so that they don't fire them at the same time, you can basically keep the town, the enemy side of the town, on fire almost constantly.
Do you guys find that a bit too powerful, or do you think that's sort of acceptable because it's kind of like Red 4's trademark?
I think supply cost on the Chinese units should definitely go up, because now they're just for the effect that they have on the enemy.
Yeah, those small Chinese supply trucks will resupply 2 PHLs complete loadout. It's really, really cheap supply cost.
Then that's what makes them so effective. So if you were to increase your actual supply cost, it would be a lot better. I mean, a lot more balanced, because you couldn't just keep a town completely saturated for the entire match.
Yeah, and the time between salvos is really small as well on those, so I don't know if it's enough just to make them more expensive to shoot or make them shoot more rarely.
Well, they should at least be the same price as the Buratinos.
Yeah.
Well, around the same price as the Buratinos missiles.
In ALB, Buratinos weren't that bad because it wouldn't happen all the time, and it'd be pretty expensive. So you maybe have it'd sell an area for a little bit, yeah, and it'd be like 5 minutes till it comes back.
Yeah, and now we get to the old maps as well. The maps weren't that stable in as if I go back to Bloody Ridge again, basically blind Buratino the edge of the town where the enemy is gonna come in, you're gonna mess up his play.
Because it's so obvious where they're going to be coming from.
There's no other option than to come in from that corridor and if you got your timing right, you'll probably get his whole army stuck in the flames there. So.
And that's what makes an Napalm Arty so powerful. You can just also block roads with him. You can block pathways.
Yeah.
From a safe distance.
And it works against all types of enemies. I mean, if you shoot it on tanks, it won't kill them, but the tanks will be panicked and they in the flames. So you can, yeah, it has a really wide effect on many things.
And if you hit properly, you can just flush them out towards your own tanks instead of away from you. So they just advance instead of retreat.
And then they're all panicked and
then they're panicked in the open and fired on by your own troops.
That's
Best
the
combination
smart way,
of troops.
Because I always try to do it so they kind of back off, but trying to make them forcefully come towards you with Napalm Arty, that's pretty cool. It's kind of like either go back and burn or go front and get killed by a Leopard 2A5.
Yeah, it's... But I'm pretty confident that they're going to do something about the Chinese napalm launchers.
Because those are definitely a little bit too good for their price.
Yeah.
Have they already made a small change, I think?
No.
No?
No.
The only thing they changed on those Chinese ones are making them napalm. Nothing else changed. They still have the same supply cost as before, same unit cost as before, same range, suppression, HE. Well, the HE is new. But besides that, everything is as before.
Wait, HE is new, so Napalm Arty beforehand didn't do explosion napalm?
At some point, maybe in the beta, at least in ALB, Napalm Arty didn't do explosive damage. I think it was brought in at the early stages of beta that they do explosive damage.
So that makes them even better, because before even, when it hits and when it directly hits, it does an explosion, and it burns you.
Well, the Chinese one do 6 HE damage on direct hit with a small area. Buratino is 10 HE with a quite big area, so it can be quite destructive on a direct hit. And usually when I bring out a Buratino, it shows up on the kill list, unlike before or in ALB.
And because I guess we can sort of transition over to rocket artillery, so you know, MLRS to be more precise. Do you guys use MLRS at all? Like BM Grads and all of that?
I dabbled around with the French and the British one, the 11 HE one, and for clearing out towns, they're not bad, because like 2 hits, and because of the small dispersion, if you use them at their minimum range, whatever you target in that town is probably dead. The only thing is the resupply cost. Like, to resupply that is a little bit more than an Atacam's missile, so it starts getting up there.
Yeah, plus it's a valuable slot in the support section that you might not find as useful as you would something else.
Like an artillery unit, like a mortar. So, because MLRS has always sort of been like the black sheep of artillery units, as they can be quite effective, especially for like stunning an entire area of tanks. But as you said, they can't, like the more expensive ones, like the M270s, they're really bloody expensive to resupply, making them a little bit less used compared to like a howitzer.
It's more of like you're getting down to the wire. You need to capture center. Because it's, you know, fast, it immediately eliminates them instead of mortars where you have to keep pounding an enemy's position. It can be used for that, but for the most part, you're better off just getting mortars.
Because it's just cheaper, easier.
It's cheaper, less resupply cost, and it can also smoke an area.
And you can get a lot of them. You can like get a lot of them for a cheap price. It's like 25 points.
And also, I mean, the only way to use the French and the British MLRS correctly is you have to sit at minimum range. Because if you don't sit at minimum range, then the dispersion starts going like just absolutely insane, and you won't ever hit a single thing.
So really, you have to keep them close. Like I know medium howitzers where you have to keep them close to the front line, just make them a bit more exposed, which I like it. It's a bit of a risk and a risk reward You keep them closer, they do more damage, but they're more likely to get killed.
Well, at the moment, artillery, normal artillery, tube artillery, mortars doesn't matter. They always have the same dispersion.
Wait, what about medium howitzers?
It
Same
doesn't matter.
dispersion, no
Any
matter
tube,
what.
has exactly the same dispersion at any range. Only for rocket artillery there's a difference.
Was it in AOB where howitzers
Yes.
had? They removed that.
They removed that,
Ah,
and I think that's bad.
yeah, same. Because I like
Although-
that risk reward.
There is still a reason to keep howitzers close, and I do this in most games. I pull them out, especially Caesars, is because if you keep them up near your front line, normally the enemy thinks they're just mortars until they really start losing a lot of units. And because mortars are kind of seen as, oh, you know, it's just a little thing that's going to annoy me, they're normally not counter batteried compared to an artillery that they somewhere.
Well, my mortars always get counter batteried when about a third or half the games, but besides that, yeah, the second advantage is less flight time. So when you call in the fire mission from a Caesar, you know it's gonna be in 10 seconds, not in 20, as it would be from the base. So you can actually predict much easier where the troops will be. And the enemy has no advanced time of, oh, he's gonna shoot me. There's shells in the air.
Yeah, and there are really, like for instance, Red Dragons don't really have a decent artillery piece in my opinion. Like the Coxswain could be one, but the fire rate is just so low, and the response time, from I remember testing it.
Yeah, I don't
So
think there's a single Red Dragon actual like tube artillery piece worth bringing. They're just
Well-
bad for the price, bad for the logistics cost.
Well, for the Coxswain, it's visited as a siege cannon, similar to the M110s or the Peon and such. So it
the
is
problem
like
is-
the bad stepchild of siege cannons, since it's less.
Yeah,
it
and that's
has
the
less
issue, is because out of those types of slow rate of fire but precision with high AG, it's bad for the price. Because a Peon is pretty much the same thing for cheaper, and other ones are only 10 points more with way better stats.
Yeah, plus they have 2 HE more, like Peon and Malaka have 2 HE more,
Yeah,
which
I think,
makes a
like,
difference
Malaka's
if you're only
actually-
shooting 2 rounds.
And a Malka is like 11 HE for only 10 points more,
10
with
HE.
double the ammo.
It's 10 HE.
Yeah, it's 10. Do you guys use heavy tube artillery,
No.
like 203 millimeters?
Because the supply
Right, yeah.
cost is just ridiculous for what they do.
Every shell costs you an arm and a leg, and it takes way too much time until it actually is fired. But when it hits, it is devastating.
I find them pretty good for counter artillery in AA units. I remember in AOB, we'd get like siege planes, fly them over. They might not get all the kills, but they'll spot all the radar AA. Yeah, with the siege with the siege cannons, like the Malkas and all of that. But yeah, they do cost an arm and a leg to fire.
And the other thing is, because of the huge range and what thus becomes a very large minimal range, you can't like put them near the front to try to reduce the flight time. They have to stay in the back, what means pretty much they see one shell fired, oh look, a Malka shot's coming, okay, let me just walk away, and I got at least 20 seconds to respond.
So really it's just too slow and big and too expensive to make them even rough roll.
Yeah.
Well,
What would make them
I've
better,
used
do you
them
think?
somewhat
if
because
you-
I don't like the continuous salvo pieces like the Emstas, but yeah, the guys definitely have a point. They aren't that attractive compared to other pieces.
Well, if we compare the aim time alone, it's 30 to 50 seconds compared to about 10 to 20 seconds for most others. For most of the medium howitzers. And the fast shooting ones or mortars can go as low as about 8 seconds. So that is a very big, very big problem for them. So
Yeah.
the Caesar has completed its fire mission of 6 shells and is on the run, and that thing has not even fired first shot.
pretty much means you have to make sure your enemy is in a completely stationary position and will not move his units for a minute. What's kind of rare.
Seems like it seems like more designed, right? I think in real life they're more designed for knocking out bunkers and actual stationary units that wouldn't be able to move. Around ALM, around Wargame, you know, it's more maneuver warfare, and you got tanks and whatnot. You can't really build defences. So it's kind of like this weird thing where they're designed to kill a type of unit that doesn't really exist.
Well,
like
if we
bunkers
take
and
the
whatnot.
name siege cannon, the siege part says, yeah, it's not really for moving targets.
Yeah, the thing is, many people still play destruction. I think that's very viable, but in conquest, there is no thing I would want to do in which this unit would be even come close to as useful as other units.
Okay. So really, is this weird stepchild that's kind of in a bad spot.
For conquest.
It does the job, but yeah, for conquest, but for destruction,
You.
where you're going to be campy.
I
What?
said EU destruction.
You.
Yeah,
I tend to agree.
I think we can all agree on that.
203mm of destruction is quite good in destruction.
Who would have guessed?
Yeah.
I prefer 300mm.
Yeah.
Do you find, if you ever guys play destruction, do you find it more better for artillery? Because conquest, you're moving, where you need fire support now and instantly, where destruction you have a lot of time because it's just a lot of camping.
I have only played one game of destruction. I think that was a mistake. Somebody changed the lobby, so I don't. Yeah, I can't really say about that.
And I think is what was said before, because of the maps are kind of slower paced and they already promote the use of artillery, taking a very slow game mode and putting on very slow maps just pretty much means it turns into an artillery duel across the river.
And artillery duels you don't really find fun. at all,
No.
Right?
Especially if the game's lagging, you don't even see the explosions.
Well, you see the explosions,
Yeah,
and then you
very
can
nice.
move, and then 10 seconds later, oh, there's damage. That is always fun. When you get an
That's
advanced
the
warning
best.
of, oh, there will be an explosion in 10 seconds, please move.
Yeah, about destruction, I have played like less than 10 games. I think like every month I decide to try it again and make some fun deck with lots of Smirch and Malka and whatever, or some troll deck or support decks or something, and I go into some destruction game, I start playing it, and after like 15 minutes I already start regretting it. But artillery is very useful in destruction because of the objective, I mean, and what artillery is. I mean, artillery, basically you spend a lot of points, let's say for a Smirch, how much does it
130?
cost? 130, alright, thanks. So 130, but it doesn't really matter how much it costs as long as you don't lose victory points from it. So basically, if you can keep it alive but only kill 10 points with it, that's already a success unless your line completely collapses. And if you have an FOB and a Smirch, you can get a lot of points, especially if you have lots of recon and your enemy can't really move up. And yeah, so it's very destruction because of how the incentives are and the objectives. Artillery is extremely good.
Would you find the artillery game better? Do you find artillery more better and balanced compared to AOB?
Well, I
Yeah.
personally like the more deadly artillery. ALB, like they were firing balls or something, they weren't really doing anything. But I personally like the a bit more deadly artillery.
Well, I think artillery is at the moment in a very weird state of slightly too powerful. A bit less range of the explosion would be nice for the bigger artilleries. Mortars are quite okay, but in the end everything is better than firecrackers of ALB.
Yeah, in
And
I think in ALB
Unless we
they
have New Year's Eve, then firecrackers are nice.
Alright, I think in LB I only used the German mortars, of which you could get 4 Panzer Mercer, and here there's a little more variety, and especially, well, no, actually, whatever. I think it's better now. It should kill some stuff.
You got more, it's kind of like a middle ground where like ALB, there are firecrackers, here they're sort of balanced because you got, you know, stunning artillery, you got a lot of choice, you got stunning artillery, cluster artillery, napalm artillery, all these different munitions to pick from. And an EEE where, in European escalation where everything is like a miniature nuke going on.
Yeah, but again we get to maps that this sort of artillery would be very, very good. Like the new, quote-unquote, new, more effective artillery would be very nice to have. Maps weren't so logged up and obvious.
So, in general, just ending things off, artillery, it's powerful, but the maps really play a big part in it because they're all just, everything's so clumped up.
Yeah, I think that's safe to say.
Yep, agree.
I agree with that as well. Because you put them in one forest, you just show out forest. But if you had more, like, if you couldn't just randomly fire guess, or randomly guess where the units are, because you know 90% of the time they're going to be in there, and there's like 3 different forests where they could be hiding their units all spread out, it'd make it a bit more fun, because it wouldn't just be blind fire.
In certain maps, certain places, there isn't really a risk of blind firing a forest, because you're going to do something. But
because they're so choked.
There are 3 or 4 forests or covers where he can be, then you might think twice of spending your supply on shelling an empty forest, possibly. So that plays in artillery as well, in my opinion.
One thing about it, it's in a somewhat similar place in anti-air with many units which are just never gonna be used, which is kind of bad, but I mean, if you look at the number of units, it's not so surprising. I think it should be, some units should be made more efficient, so there are harder choices, just like with anti-air.
Yeah, because there's a lot of, it's the thing in Wargame, there's so many units to pick from, it's really hard to balance all of them to be all worthwhile in their own little niche.
If you want a good unit, take the AML60.
Oh, that's
really?
You see the base model. 2600 meter artillery.
Yeah.
Even ATGMs have more range than that.
I've actually never seen, or maybe once I've seen that thing used in a game.
Well, most likely it was upgraded versions of several autocannon.
Yeah. That one's not too bad. I kind of like the Zephyr on its own little way. Runs out of ammo fast, but if you kind of keep it close, it does do quite a bit of nice damage. If you kind of treat it like a howitzer tank. I mean like an AVRE.
Good, for the same price, you could get the German Panzermörser HS30, which actually does stuff instead of trigger.
So it's a tickle. Yeah. I remember at runtime at Zephyr, I think I killed a helicopter with it, like a hind. Don't know how.
Isn't?
I
think there's some bug when I don't know if they fixed it now, but if a helo is stationary and you can you tell your artillery to shoot it, it will hit it actually. It's really annoying in destruction. In the one game I played some months ago.
Helos hover at what, 20-30 meters above ground in high hover, and the splash damage goes upwards, so you can actually hit them.
No, the direct hits. It will get direct hits. I don't know if they fixed it, but the other team they knew how to do it, and I also did it with their helos after. I've heard about it before, and you can get direct hits if the helo, if you select it the right way. It will hit it directly and it will insta-kill it. They killed like 2 KA-52 like that with direct hits, yeah.
Well, I don't know. Never seen it.
I was afraid about it once. It works. It worked at one point. Maybe they fixed it. I don't know.
Yeah, but I have to definitely agree with Random that there are so many redundant artillery pieces that it would be spark some life into them.
Well, every NATO nation has an M109, so what should be the difference? The German one is a carbon copy of the British one, but has 5 meter more range, and the French one, no. The US one has 5 meter less dispersion. Woohoo.
Yeah, like, yeah, right, like, everyone really has an M1, almost everyone has an M109.
All but the French.
Or a lot of nations do. Well, yeah, French, Swedish, and I think Japan as well. Japan got, like...
Japan has
no, they got an M109.
155 SP, which is a M109.
Yeah.
Just different name.
Yeah.
And for PEC we have the Acacia, or the Gvashdika, which is very common, or the Dana for the for 2 of the nations. So yeah, there is not many different artillery pieces in the world, so that are in the game. So there is not much that can be done for different things.
Maybe not
And
make them different, but make them so that they aren't automatically a bad choice. Take.
Yeah.
Because right now it just feels like there are units that are like automatic, like in the AA section there are units that are outshine the others by a mile. Then there's no point in taking the certain type units.
Make the users one better is always a very important thing.
I think that's the whole game in general. There's a lot of useless, a lot of redundant units. Yeah, could use a bit of love.
Definitely.
Just a price change. Even just 5 points, and even just like a 5-point price change in some units would really make him a lot better.
Yeah.
And just one final question. We can all agree that you should never ever make a support deck. And never go... Don't do a 1v1 in a support deck.
No, support decks are very bad, so I don't... Yeah, they're very bad, unless in certain team games maybe they're worth it. Yeah, but only in destruction, I think.
Yeah. Because you always have... If you're playing with a group of guys, it's like, oh, I'm going to go play support and they just play artillery. And they never get a frontline unit.
Yeah, that's just douchey.
Yeah. But people still do it everywhere. Yeah. Anyway, those buggers. Yeah, support decks are sort of... Anytime I hear someone saying, I'm going to go support, just shivers down my spine. Nope, can't handle this. It's just... Yeah. I think that really ends things off, yeah. So, that's support unit, AA and artillery, kind of all figured out. And, I don't really know how to end this off. Yeah. Artillery and AA. You heard it, folks.